Record better audio anywhere with Motive digital microphones from Shure. Easy-to-use options like the MV88 plug directly into your phone or computer and include a free app. Create studio-quality sound for podcasts, music, and videos. Visit Shure.com to learn more.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hour for July 5th, 2012. Tonight, we feature a discussion by your host, Poke Runyon, that's myself, on the magic of the Arabian Nights, or Al-Flaya Walaya, as Crowley liked to call it, referring to Sir Richard Burton's annotated translation. And for those of you latecomers to this whole business, that's not Richard Burton, the actor. That's Richard Burton, Captain Richard Burton, the explorer. Actually, the magic in Burton's version of the Arabian Nights is mostly in the footnotes, which, of course, are very extensive because Burton was quite an anthropologist. But there is one specific tale which outlines the whole scheme of Muslim magical abjad, which is a Western term for the Arab Kabbalah. Now, we'll discuss that particular tale, and as I said in the abstract, you have to listen in to learn which story has the mystic juice. And it's about 55 pages long, so I don't think you're going to find it on the internet yet. And we will then move on to King Solomon Suleiman, the legends of King Suleiman and the Queen of Sheba, and the nature and hierarchy of the jinn, the Turkish version of the Masonic third degree, the North Sabaean or Iranian contribution, Sufi methods and teachings, and the legacy of Picatrix. So, if you want to get the gem on the gin, tune in and we will open sesame for you. Okay. Now, this is a subject which has fascinated all of us from the days of our childhood. It especially fascinated Lovecraft because Lovecraft, you remember from our Necronomicon show, Lovecraft went through when he was a kid, about 7 years old, a very precocious kid, and he went through an Arabian phase, and his mother she kind of cooperated with his Arabian phase, and he fixed up his room like a seraglio, and he called himself, and this is a 7-year-old kid now, he called himself Abdul al-Hazrid, and you know where that went, where that ended up, and of course, so I don't claim to be as erudite and as talented as Lovecraft, but I went through a somewhat similar phase when I was a kid. I loved the children's version of the Arabian Nights, and those old Mario Montez, John Hall Arabian movies. Oh boy, they were really, really lush. And we had this idea back when we were kids that magic really, really, really was. That the whole idea of sorcery and genies and spirits and magic that the great wizards was essentially Arabian. So now let's start off by reading a brief chapter in the Book of Solomon's Magic, which I just sent out 5 more copies to Amazon in case you want to buy it. A chapter called Arabian Origins of Magic and Witchcraft. And we'll read that chapter, and that'll give you a good starter for this program. So, Aleister Crowley began his preface to Mather's translation of the Goetia with a tantalizing reference to the Arabian Nights, setting it on a par with the Bible as a source of esoteric lore. But he offered no explanation for the comparison, and in a subliminal sense, we accept the Arabian magician as the archetypal paragon of our occult tradition. But if we were asked to name one historical example, few of us could. If asked to cite even one Arabian magical text, most of us, except the believers in the Necronomicon, would have to beg off. And yet, the vision of the Arabian Mage commanding the jinn, enslaved by King Solomon, persists undimmed in our mind's eye. The historical reality behind this romantic image is an example of suppressed truth reasserting itself in legend and folklore. The fact is that much of European magic and witchcraft was developed from Arabian sources emanating from Moorish Spain before 1492. For a millennium, clouds of smoke have been stirred up to obscure this essential truth by rabbis who do not want the origins of medieval Kabbalah too closely examined, by imams and even Sufis who do not want the medieval pagan cults of Haran and Morocco revived, a mixed bag of Christians, theosophists, and self-styled authorities on Nazi occultism who continue to insist that Western magic is essentially a survival of Manichaean Gnosticism. Now, a fresh wind of genuine scholarship emanating from the University of London has recently blown away this long-standing smokescreen. Frances Yates, in 1964, her inquiry into the origins of Renaissance Neoplatonism, has pointed out that the Hispano-Moorish Picatrix, that's the aim of the sage, has been a major source for the astrological magic of the 15th century magus Marsilio Ficino. Now, this revelation, along with J.B. Siegel's 1963 study on the Sabaean planetary cult of Haran, directed our attention back to Lynn Thorndike's, in 1923, monumental history of magic and experimental science. That goes to 8 volumes, by the way, wherein we discovered a wealth of information on Arabian magical lore. Now, in the terminal essay, following his translation of Al-Falaya Walaya, that's the Arabian Nights, Sir Richard Burton describes 9th century Baghdad as the richest and noblest city in the world at that time. Cinematic Sinbad fantasies hardly exaggerate its luxury and power. These were the times of the great caliphs and their fabulous court magicians. Now, mightiest of the wizards of old Baghdad was Thebat ibn Karat, the Sabaean from Haran. Now, the Sabaeans were a mysterious race of celestial magicians who had lived in their ancestral city of Haran, and that's up between the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates, straight south of the modern Turkish border, since before the time of Abraham. And there they had perpetuated the astromagical rituals of ancient Sumer and Akkad. Now, to this arcanum, they had added the Book of Enoch and the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, which in Arabic is Idris. And in the Quran, the Prophet had cited them as exempt from forced conversion to Islam. So they were allowed to profess their pagan philosophy while serving the sultans as court astrologers and wizards. And this is why the magic described in the Arabian Nights has such an obviously pagan character. Now, the practice of attributing specific metals, perfumes, colors, jewels, and geometric forms to the planets in magical rituals can be traced back to the Sabaeans. And although there was some interest among medieval Jews in astrology, the astrological planetary aspects of magic and of the practical Kabbalah are very much Sabaean. They're also Assyrian, too, in an earlier sense. Besides the great Sabaean influence, we should also consider the writings of the 9th century Islamic sage Al-Kindi, who authored a treatise called The Theory of Magical Art or Stellar Rays, which was the precursor of Marsilio Ficino's Spiritus, a concept in which the rays of the stars came down and with the spirit and activated the spirit in man. The idea of man acting in synchronicity with the celestial pulse of a living universe goes back to Al-Kindi. The works of Abu Mansur, Costa ben Luca, and Rasis should also be cited as major sources from which European magicians drew their inspirations. And in the area of sexual magic, we should also consider the Beni Yudra cult of sexual arousal without consummation, intended to raise enthusiasm which could be redirected into poetic inspiration. And this practice spread from Baghdad to Spain and influenced the medieval European courts of love, according to Walker in 1970. That's the troubadours, by the way. And in the Kabbalistic perspective, there is the question of language itself. Now, Hebrew Kabbalistic gematria is based on a number-letter analog, which certainly triggers subconscious associations, but Arabic Kabbalah, Abjad, and by the way, Abjad merely means the first 5 letters of the Arabic alphabet, is based on root word analogs which are more direct in their deep structure associations. As an example, Idris Shah cites the consonantal root KHLD in the Arabic word for mole. That's not a mole on your face, that's a little mole, it's an animal, as synonymous with 6 other words of philosophical significance. And this is an intrinsic unilateral system, whereas Hebrew depends on the bilateral relationship with mathematics. His math analog is profoundly important. I said this math analog is profoundly important in its own right, but the mathematical relationship also obtains in Arabic as well. And the barbarous names in the grimoires are of Arabic or Gnostic origin, and they actually are number-letter formulas in a coursing letter form. Now, Semitic paganism manifesting in Moorish Spain also seems to have been a major source for what became European witchcraft, a theory that Gerald Gardner himself lent support to in his novel I Magic's Aid, 1949. Idris Shah, 1964, suggests that witchcraft grew out of the cult and totem of the Anisa tribe, and the word for the goat, Anis, being cognate with Anesia. And he also cites the use of the Aldame knife, meaning bloodletter, and the witches' cross-quarterly festivals are noted as being identical with those of the Arabian calendar. The use of a datura-based flying ointment is also cited by Michael Harner, 1973, as central to European witch cult practice. And this is corroborated by Shaw's linguistic reconstructions. Archon Durrell, 1962. Now, by the way, we have since discovered that Archon Durrell was a pseudonym for Idris Shah. Archon Durrell likewise attributes a Moorish-Spanish origin to European witchcraft, but he links it to a Moroccan cult of the double-horned, which might be an outgrowth of the Amnesia cult cited by Shaw, which is, of course, Durrell himself. Durrell also mentions the Aldame knife for self-sacrifice, and of course this is This is kind of redundant. Most importantly, he credits the horned cult with a concept of reincarnation back into the same coven, which is strikingly similar to Gardnerian eschatology. Widdershins circumambulation is shown to be originally Muslim, and of course 1734 does that. And El Aswad, the black man, is traced to the Moorish horned cult. Now, our space is too brief in this article to permit a full exegesis of this material. Readers who find this witchcraft theory disturbing are urged to read the sources before forming an opinion. Now, finally, we should remember that the Goetia of the Lemegeton calls forth the jinn from the brass vessel of King Solomon in accord with Arabian legends of magic. Solomon's secret seal with which he stoppered the jinn inside the vessel, according to the Goetia, was the ancient Carthaginian Tenitrum, the double-horned glyph of the North American moon goddess. That's controversial. This symbol, surmounted by the Sabaean planetary septagram, is the insignia of the Ordo Templi Astartes and should serve as a continual reminder of our rich legacy from the wizards of old Baghdad and the sorcerers of Morocco. I got a couple of nice little footnotes here I'll read also, too. The Hebrew of today, although derived from ancient roots, was reconstructed in medieval Spain on an Arabic grammar. Arabic itself is a reconstructed form of ancient Aramaic, with 6 new letters added to match the mansions of the moon. Now, remember that, because that will really figure in when we get deeper into this discussion. Just remember that Arabic, like Hebrew, which came, like modern Hebrews came after and was influenced by Arabic, but Arabic was created specifically to have 28 letters, so you have 1 letter for each mansion of the moon. Now, of the 3 major Western Kabbalistic systems, Hebrew, Arabic, and Greek, the latter is probably the oldest. Yep. Scholars now are I'm not saying they're completely in agreement, but the Greek Kabbalah as an alphanumeric system relating to the celestial analog came before the Hebrew Kabbalah was put into its form. You know, it certainly is Zoharic form. Now, the version of the brass vessel legend recounted in the Lemegeton comes from the Talmud. However, the Talmudic source is quite possibly Arabian, as this fascinating quote from Burton suggests. Bak Tanuz is the lord of 3 Muslim troops of the wandering jinns, which number a total of 12 bands and extend from Sind to Europe. The jinns, divs, peris, or fairies, and the other pre-Adamite creatures were governed by 72 sultans, all known as Suleiman. When he refused to bow before Adam, he and his chiefs were eternally imprisoned. And that's from Burton, Volume 3. Elsewhere in the Arabian Nights, there are many references to Solomon sealing the jinn in brass bottles with his magic ring and then casting them into the sea. Well, that gives us a good start on Arabian magic. Now, I said in the abstract that there was in the Arabian Nights, and by the way, the Arabian Nights, Burton's edition goes to 16 volumes. And before the show, Jeffrey James, Maestro Jeffrey James, emailed me and he said, Polk, he said, be sure and tell him how you traded some old copies of Weird Tales for a complete set of Burton's Arabian Nights. Jeff, I'm not sure it's exactly how that happened. Maybe I didn't tell that story exactly. I think what it was I had to unload one of those old pulp magazines I had. What I really had actually was, and I wish I hadn't sold it actually, but I had 4 issues of Amazing Stories from 1941, which had the whole Burroughs, the last Burroughs Mars book, or no, it wasn't the last Burroughs Mars book, but it was the last traditional Burroughs Mars book, and that was called the Yana of Gathol, and there was 4 issues of Amazing Stories with J. Allen St. John covers and copious interior illustrations. God, this was a beautiful set, and I took that down to this little shop and I sold it, and then I noticed they had these boxes and boxes, great big boxes. And I said, "What's in those?" And the dealer, he says, "Oh, those are sets of the Arabian Nights, and we're overloaded with them. We got to get rid of them. We got to get them out of here." And I said, "Well, let me see one." My God, these things were leather bound, gold stamped, leather bound, beautifully printed. I mean, they were just magnificent. And I said, "Well, how much?" I knew I couldn't afford it. I said, "How much are you asking for 16 volumes?" And he said, "Oh, you can have one of them for $50." Whew, boy, well, there went most of what I had sold the Burroughs, the John Carter collection for, went to. But I just had to. I mean, this was fantastic. It's $1,000 set of books here, and privately printed by the Burton Club. So I've had the Arabian Nights lovingly on the shelf for quite a while. And so I had a chance to really go through, because I love the Arabian Nights, the abridged versions and the kids' versions, but this was the definitive one, and of course it was totally uncensored, and they're very, very sexy, and very specific in that regard. But it was full of. Burton was a wonderful anthropologist. I mean, ethnologist, anthropologist, and he just loaded down the book with these footnotes like the one I just read you. So I had a chance to go through. I didn't read the whole thing, but at least I skimmed through and got the gist of most of the tales. And there are a number of them that are very magical and very like the City of Brass, and then there's the Queen of the Serpents, and of course then you got Aladdin. Well, Aladdin is actually one of the supplemental nights, and it's kind of a Chinese story. Well, it's a Persian, but it takes place in China. But and there are numerous tales in which magic occurs, but when it comes to really, really having the kind of secrets that Crowley is talking about, there is one tale in the Arabian Nights that is it's sort of the core, and what it is in the 5th volume, that's volume number 5, and it's Warren is scanning my copy right now, and so I can't get right down to it. But it's called Abu Hassan Slave Girl. Tawana, can I get the book back, or are we scanning it? Yeah, I want to have the book back. Yeah, I want to get this right because well, thanks, honey. I want to get this back because I want to make sure that we get the title right here. Okay. Volume 5 on page 189, Abu al-Husn and his slave girl, Tawadud. Okay. Now, and Burton has a footnote here. He says, Lane omits this tale, and as it would not only require volumes of commentary, but be extremely tiresome to most readers. Quite true, but it is the most valuable to Oriental students who are beginning their studies as an excellent compendium of doctrines and practice according to the Shafi'i school. Now, what Burton is telling us right there is this is the esoteric heart of the Arabian Nights. Now, what this is, about 57 pages. And the way the story goes is this. Abu has this slave girl. She's 16 years old. And he wants to study astronomy, astrology, magic, and theology, all the interesting stuff. And he discovers that this 16-year-old girl is virtually an encyclopedia of this sort of thing. She ends up before a group of imams, and these are people, of course, who have memorized the whole Quran and everything else, and they start questioning her, like the Pharisees questioned Jesus. They start questioning her about doctrine and all, and that's the vehicle for her answering all these questions and revealing, in the course of this, the entire scope of Arabic astrology, planetary influences, cosmology, the elemental aspects, all of the, and to a certain degree, abjad, the relationships. This is a core document, as Burton says. If you want to understand Arabian magic, this is something you really need to read. And I'll read it again. Abu al-Husn and his slave girl, Tawadud. And it's page 189 in the 5th volume of the Burton translation. Very nice. I have to skim through here and see if I can reach a little something in here to give you the idea of what it's like. Let's see here. I try to find something that it really relates to the Hermetic. By the way, the Arabic magic is very, very Hermetic. Their name for Hermes Trismegistus is Idris, and of course Idris Shah took that obviously as his name. And here we go. Let's see. Well, he's got one on the bones of the body, and let's see what it is. And this is really compendious here, but I was trying to find. Here we go. Now with this, the astronomer hung his head very low, and she said to him, "O astronomer, I will not ask thee one question, which if thou answers not, I will take thy claws." This is kind of an intellectual strip poker here. "Ask," replied he, and quoth she, "Where is Saturn's dwelling place?" And he answered, "In the 7th heaven." And she asked, "And of Jupiter? In the 6th heaven. And of Mars? In the 5th heaven. And that of the Sun? In the 4th heaven. And that of Venus? In the 3rd heaven. And that of Mercury? In the 2nd heaven. And that of the Moon? In the 1st heaven," quoth she. "Well answered, but I have one more question to ask thee." And quoth he, "Ask." Accordingly she said, "Now tell me concerning the stars. Into how many parts are they divided?" But he was silent and answered nothing, and she cried to him, "Put off thy clothes." So he doffed them, and she took them, and after which the Caliph said to her, tell us the answer to thy question. And she replied, O commander of the faithful, the stars are divided into 3 parts, whereof 1/3 is hung in the sky of the earth, as it were lamps, to give light to the earth, and a part is used to shoot the demons withal, when they draw near by stealth to listen to the talk in heaven. And quoth Allah Almighty, Verily we have light in the sky of the earth, with the adornment of the stars, and have appointed them for the projectiles against every rebellious Satan. And the 3rd part is hung in air to illuminate the seas and give light to what is therein. And quote the astronomer, I have one more question to ask. And let's see, I have one more question to ask, which is, and she answered, I will avow myself beaten. Say on, answered she. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of the day had ceased, and so saying, had the dawn of day had ceased saying her permitted say. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what this is like, and it's very detailed. It goes on and on and on and on. And describing their ideas of cosmology and their ideas of what the heavenly relationship and the demonic relationships of the heavens are. Now, so this is one that if you really want to understand. Now, there's another book that I'm going to mention. Back before 9/11, when I had several contacts in the Middle East, and after that, of course, they sort of disappeared. But before then, I had a friend in Istanbul who I was communicating with, and he said to me one time in an email, he said, Poke, he said, if you want to understand the jinn, you really want to understand the jinn, he said, read a book called Journey to the Orient. And it's by a Frenchman, one of the French decadents, one of the Hashashin, and his name was Gerard Nerval. And we mentioned him before, and Gerard Nerval did the grand tour over in the East, went from Egypt up to Syria and from there to Turkey, and had quite a few adventures. And he wrote it up. These Oriental travel books were quite popular at the time, and so he wrote up this very detailed account of his travels and all the lore he picked up. And he had one story in there about how the Druze sect originated. Some Sabaeans, who I mentioned before, because Sabaeans were exempt from all the restrictions in the Quran. They were exempt from them, and so they got the Caliph down in Cairo. He got in with the Sabaeans. They got him drunk, and they got him smoking hashish, and then he ran off, abdicated, and ran off to Syria and started the Druze cult, according to this. I don't know if there's any Druze listening. I hope I'm not being sacrilegious. But so that's one story Gerard Nerval has in there. But the main one, the one that my friend was referring to, was it was the Queen of the Morning and King Solomon, Prince of the Jinn. Now, the Queen of the Morning, of course, is the Queen of Sheba, and King Solomon being the Prince of the Jinn. This is what this amounts to is a Turkish version of the Masonic third degree. Very, very, very apocryphal, by the way. And yet, it contains some very, very interesting insights into Muslim spiritual or magical lore, especially in relation to the jinn. And what it comes down to is this. There are lots of legends recounted in the Quran and also in the various Muslim legends of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon or King Suleiman. Now you find that most of the idea of Solomon, who of course built the temple, the great temple, most of these ideas of Solomon being the great magician come from not from Hebrew sources, although some do, but most of them come from the Arabs. They really revered Solomon, and they had all these legends of Solomon and Sheba, and some of them are in the Quran. There's an interesting legend where Solomon has this. He wants to find out if the Queen of Sheba has hairy legs, and so he creates this glass floor that she's supposed to walk over so he can spy on her, see if she has hairy legs. But the Queen of Sheba, regardless of how hairy her legs were, the Queen of Sheba was supposed to be very beautiful, and she was also supposed to be the daughter of a prince of the jinn. Now, the question here is what are the jinn? Well, okay, what are the jinn? Well, the jinn are kind of peculiar to Arab lore, and they're pre-Muhammadan, Muhammad, but they've been incorporated. You find them in the Quran quite a bit. Now, what they were is what we would call them in Hermetic parlance. We would call them fire elementals. That's basically what we would call them, although I don't. The Arabs would call them that, but that's what we call them. And they were spirits of fire, and that's smokeless fire, by the way. That's spiritual fire. They were fire creatures that were pre-Adamic. In other words, they existed before Adam. And there are tribes of them, and there's a hierarchy. There's the Murids and the Afrits and there's the lowest, and I'm not even sure they qualify as jinn. And the lowest are called the ghouls, and the ghouls that haunt cities of tombs and desert ruins and all. I think that's kind of an insult to call a ghoul a jinn, but jinn. The jinn supposedly, according to Arabian legend, helped King Solomon build the temple, and this got into Jewish legend too. And Solomon had a magic ring, which, according to Naval, he actually got that ring from the Queen of Sheba. Now, the Queen of Sheba, of course, came up from Saba, which was now it's called Yemen. Something that we need to go a little background on this because this is something a lot of people don't understand. One of the great wonders of the ancient world that nobody talks about, at least not on our side of the world, was the great dam of Saba. And Saba, or present-day Yemen, which we're having so much trouble with right now, which is a dust bin, and it's swarming with all kinds of problems. But before the dam, the great ancient dam, became inoperative, in other words, before it got soldered up and then finally broke, before that time, and that was about 200 years before Muhammad, which for those of you who don't remember, that was around 600 A.D. So, 400 A.D., the dam broke, and it plunged Yemen, the whole Arabia Felix, it plunged that whole area into poverty and misery. Before that time, that huge dam that they had, which, as I say, nobody knows how old it was. It was gigantic. It was a miracle of ancient engineering that dated back almost to the time of the pyramids, if not earlier. And it made a paradise out of southern Arabia, the southern coast of Arabia, and this was the realm of the Queen of Sheba, and this was the realm of the Sabaeans. And the Sabaeans were very, very, very civilized. They had their own language, their own culture, and they were planetary worshipers. They were worshippers of the stars. And they had spread their empire all the way over into Ethiopia to the point where the Ethiopians think the Queen of Sheba was Ethiopian. Actually, we're pretty sure she was Yemeni, but or Sabaean, but this is why there is the remnants of a great ancient civilization in Ethiopia, because of this wonderful ancient civilization here. Well, it was all destroyed when the dam broke. And this, of course, was long after the Queen of Sheba and Solomon. But Muhammad, because of the fact that the Sabaeans had been so powerful and been so well educated and been so, even though they were pagans, Muhammad exempted them from forced conversion in the Quran, not once but 3 times. He specified that Christians, Jews, and Sabaeans were to be exempted from forced conversion because they were essentially people of the book. Now, the Sabaeans were, almost extinct by the time this conquering emir got way up there to Haran at the headwaters of the Euphrates about 800 AD, and he rode up to the gates of Haran, and the Iranians came out, and the emir said, "Well, what are you people? Are you Christians, Jews? What are you?" And the Iranians said, "Well, we're Iranians." He said, "Well, do you believe in God?" "Well, we believe in a whole number of gods. We worship them. They're the planets, and we have been preserving the astronomy and the astrology and the magic of ancient Babylon for the past 3,000 years or more. And this is the city of the moon god, and that's who we are." And so the emir said, "Well, I'm going to go off and conquer some more up there, in northern Turkey and Anatolia and whatever. And when I come back, you better decide whether you're Jews, whether you're Christians, or whether you're Sabaeans, because if you're not one of the 3, we're going to enslave you and force you to convert to Islam and all that." So off he rode, and the Iranians took counsel, and they said, "Well, we don't want to be Jews, and we don't want to be Christians. So I guess we're going to be Sabaeans." We know that there aren't very many Sabaeans left down there, but they were pretty much the same as we are. They worship the planets, and they're pagans, and so let's be Sabaeans. And so they tried that, and one of them suggested, he said, "Well, wait a minute now. This guy's going to come back and he's going to ask us what our book is, because we got to be people of the book." And I don't know what kind of book did the Sabaeans have, and we can't. Nobody seems to know what it was at this point. And so they decided that they would adopt 2 books just to make sure that they had their bases covered. One of them was the Pomander and the Asclepius of Hermes Trismegistus, which was from Alexandria, of course, at the time, and they were quite familiar with it. So they adopted that, and then somebody said, "Well, that's not biblical enough. These people are biblical. They're going to want something biblical." So they said, "Okay, well, here's our bet. We'll adopt the Book of Enoch, and so those 2 ought to cover us." So that's how the Hermes Trismegistus became, and the Book of Enoch both became sacred texts for the whole European tradition, was from the Sabaeans adopting it. Those 2 books around about 800, and after the well dried up in Iran. By the way, the emir never came back. He never did come back. But the Sabaeans, meanwhile, the well finally went dry up in Iran, and they had to leave the city. And unfortunately, they did right before the Mongols came sweeping in. But so they left, and they had a diaspora, and they went all over the Arab world, the Arab Empire at that time, And because they were Sabaeans, they could actively teach magic. They could do horoscopes. They could teach their form of magic, which is remarkably close to our planetary magic that we do, because obviously ours derives from it. And so they became the professors of magic and the wizards of the Arabian Nights. Now, the wizards of the Arabian Nights, of course, as you know, they're fabulous. Now, if you want to know a couple of sources here that you could, if you want to really read some Sabaean stuff, Christopher Warnock, who's done a wonderful job of rendering the European version of the Picatrix. This is the one to get, by the way, from the Picatrix. So we did a show on this. Picatrix, translated by John Michael Greer and Christopher Warnock. This is the Latin version of the Arabic Picatrix. There are there's a 2-volume set of the Picatrix translated directly from the Arabic. That's good, and if you're really a serious magician, you'd probably need to have both John Michael Greer and Christopher Warnock's version, the Latin version, which is the one Agrippa used, by the way, and you also need to have the Arabic version for comparison. But the one that I really recommend for practical magicians is the one by John Michael Greer, Christopher Warnock, the one I'm looking at. Now, Picatrix has a large section of Sabaean magic in here. Years ago, before Picatrix was translated either out of Arabic or Latin, we ran, in the 7th grade, we ran a whole section on Sabaean magic, which we had translated from the German, and so we've been using the Sabaean magical system for quite a while. I think that you should definitely, if you want to really get a grasp on the Arabic concept, you need to look at that. Christopher Warnock, though, has published a little book by Thabit Ibn Qurra, which I mentioned as the great wizard, the great Sabaean wizard of Baghdad. This guy, Ibn Qurrat or Qurra, he was just absolutely fantastic magician. We owe a lot of our concepts and all to him. Now, the little book that Chris Warnock has is called De Imaginibus, the De Imaginibus of Thabit Ibn Qurra, and this is really a fascinating little book. And of course, also, I want to bring out that the Arabs, their magic is very, very, because Arabic, as you know, is 28 letters, one for each dimension of the moon. And Picatrix over and over and over again emphasizes that all astrological magic comes through the moon. And the most important aspect of all magic is the mansions of the moon and the images of the mansions of the moon, because all the planetary magic is reflected through the moon. Now, I want to get back here and make sure I cover this business of the Turkish version of the Masonic third degree. This is when Gerard Dinerval, after he finished, his down in Cairo, finding out about what happened to the Caliph and the drunken stoned Caliph who ran off and founded the Jerusalem. He went up to Istanbul, and for 5 successive nights, he listened to a storyteller recounting this story of the Queen of Sheba and literally making a fool out of King Solomon. She was according to this story, she's much smarter than King Solomon, and she falls in love with Adoniram, who's the architect of the temple. Now, that's Adoniram, then in Western Masonic terminology, that's Hiram Abiff. And Adoniram is, like the Queen of Sheba. He is part jinn. Of course, in the Masonic version of the legend, he's part Jewish and part Phoenician. His mother's Jewish, his father's Phoenician. But in this story, his father is Phoenician, but who knows who his mother? Who knows what? But he's supposed to be one of the jinn, and there was a son of the jinn, creature of fire. Well, according to this story, Queen of Solomon really really falls for Adoniram, and yet Solomon gets jealous. And Solomon, Adoniram, is casting the brazen sea, which is this great achievement, where this huge bronze laver that stands in front of the temple. And this thing is as big as a swimming pool, and it's all made of brass. And he's got all this molten brass in this huge cauldron, and they're pouring it, and they have all these different spouts around it, and they have a big public show when he's going to pour this thing. And Solomon, who is jealous, conspires with the ruffians to plug up the holes, and so Adoniram sees that this is happening, that his casting is being ruined. And about that time, Tubal-Cain, who is all kinds of traditions about Tubal-Cain appears to him and says, "You're a creature of the jinn. Just dive into that molten bronze and go and unplug those you can do it." So he does. He dives into the molten bronze, and he's gone. But he unplugs the holes, and the casting of the sea is accomplished. And King Solomon is sitting there with his mouth open, and the Queen of Sheba understands what's going on. And so what happens is that Adoniram reincarnates or reconstitutes himself. Maybe he got faxed. John Carter got faxed to Mars, according to the latest versions. Maybe somehow or other got faxed down into the caverns, and Tubal-Cain, who is one of the jinn in just about every tradition, Tubal-Cain's down there and introduces him to all the secrets of the cavern world and all the secrets of the gnomes and the elementals and the jinn and the secrets of the fires of the earth. And then somehow or other, Adoniram makes it back up after he's had his lesson in the magic of the jinn, and links up with the Queen of Sheba, and they run off together and leave King Solomon in the lurch. That's the Turkish version. And I remember my friend told me, he said, "You really want to understand the jinn, you got to read this." This is called Queen of the Morning and King Solomon, Prince of the Jinn, and it's from Gerard de Nerval's Journey to the Orient, for those of you who want to look it up. And now, let's see. Sufi methods and teachings. Oh, boy. One thing that we need to get straight right now, by the way, Idris Shah, who was an Afghan originally, and Idris Shah's great book is called it's called The Sufis. He had a lot of other books, but the one that really is his best one is called The Sufis. And it's a big compendious book, and it's got a lot of good information in it. And the Orthodox Sufis, they kind of poo-poo him, but don't let that. They're mostly being sectarian because there are all kinds of different Sufi orders. Now, the one thing, though, that you need to know about the Sufis is that they have a very oblique form of magic. The Sabaeans, on the other hand, that's real straight Hermetic magic. We half of our Hermetic magic comes from the Sabaeans. I mean, really, but the Sufis are still they're very much constrained by Muslim Sharia restrictions. And so as a result, Sufis do everything, all their teachings are very oblique. They teach with poetry. They teach with analogy. They never quite come right out with their magic. They never quite come right out and do it. I mean, they aren't like the Golden Dawn or like Galatia or anything like that. They don't do it that way. They dance and they play music and they chant, but it's all done in an oblique manner because they don't want to violate Sharia, and Muslims are very circumspect about things like that. So Sufi magic tends to be, you have to really interpret the symbolism behind it, and this is one of the reasons why Sufi magic is more in the nature of meditation and the nature of say transcendental, what we would call theurgy. Sufis don't engage in thaumaturgy at all. I think everybody knows the difference between theurgy and thaumaturgy. And theurgy is entirely transcendental, entirely spiritual, where you're invoking God. You might chant the 93 names of God, or in the Golden Dawn we could do endless permutations of the holy name, which we've done. And this is theurgy. Whereas thaumaturgy, that's wonder working. That's where you set up the triangle and you beat the drum and you go around circumambulating we invoke the Bornless One now, all that kind of stuff, and you stare in the mirror of the crystal ball and you invoke the spirits, and that's thaumaturgy. That's the kind of stuff that a devout Muslim would be buried up to his neck, have a black bag on his head, and everybody would go and buy bags of rocks so they could stone him to death. And you don't want to do that. In fact, I used to, back before 9/11, I'd get orders for the Book of Solomon's Magic from the Middle East, and I would ask whoever, they'd email them, and I'd say, are you in a country where you can be buried up to your neck and have a black bag put on your head, and if you are, you just don't want to have this book arrive in the mail. You really don't. And so, sure enough, some of them would realize this and would say, no, don't send it. Now, there are, however, and you can find them on the internet, you can find some maverick Arab sorcerers who summon jinn and in fact, I remember I even saw on the internet somewhere, I saw one of them trying to do it. I was kind of underwhelmed, but then with all the restrictions that they have, then we'll give him an A for effort anyway. So this should give you a pretty good feeling for Arabian magic, and also the tremendous contribution, because we wouldn't have the Hermetic treatises, and we wouldn't have so much of the Pythagorean work if it hadn't been for the Arabs preserving it, and then we got it back, back from the Arabs in the early Renaissance. We began to get it back. Meanwhile, they had their golden era, around about Charlemagne's time. They were really having their golden era, and they were they're kind of going into decline by the time we started getting their material. Now, so the books that you want to be looking at, Ticatrix, Arabian Nights, Volume 5, and Gerard de Nerval's Journey to the Orient. And next week, we're going to do Enochian Aethers, and we're going to do them from Tayet Stalile, and we're going to do Enochian Aethers, show you how they're done, how they derive, all the material that we can come up with on Enochian Aethers, and we'll even do one for you. So, meanwhile, good magic.
Record better audio anywhere with Motive digital microphones from Shure. Easy-to-use options like the MV88 plug directly into your phone or computer and include a free app. Create studio-quality sound for podcasts, music, and videos. Visit Shure.com to learn more.
Hey, I'm here at your Metro PCS store. What's the best deal I can get for switching over?
How does a free smartphone sound?
Sounds good, but is it a tiny smartphone?
Nope. 5-inch HD screen.
Good brand?
Great brand. Samsung, and it's a Galaxy.
So I got a free Samsung Galaxy?
Yeah, you're a tough man to bargain with.
Everyone gets a free Samsung Galaxy On 5 at Metro PCS. Switch today and get a free smartphone after instant rebate. Yes, a free Samsung Galaxy. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included. Not valid for numbers currently on the T-Mobile network. See store for details, terms, and conditions, and network info.